Hello everyone and thanks for tuning in. This is Ian at Phys Cluster Care with another video. In this video what we'll be looking at is the ColourMFA kit, what's included in the kit, along with the best tools to be using to handle the wiring and some tips to help you save some time wiring it up, because I know it can be a very lengthy process. So let's jump straight in. Okay, so what you'll get is the main screen and the motherboard unit, which has the USB plug already soldered on with the wires attached to it. And one of the first things you want to do is split this apart. Now you do have to be super careful with this, just so you don't break the LCD, and it is attached quite firmly, so you might want to grab a little screwdriver or something to help you separate the two parts. So I like to grab a really thin screwdriver and just pop it in here, pry it apart. Do one side at a time so that the legs are coming out evenly. There we go. Okay, so essentially for most of the time until you're ready to install it into the instrument cluster, you're going to be working with this side. The screen is just at the very end when you're up to testing. There's also a little speaker there which helps to give you the warning beeps from the ColourMFA to the instrument cluster. Your instrument cluster will also give you warning beeps, but they're usually related to the service warnings. You've got a big roll of wiring, which is a thinner gauge than the small amount of wiring, which is of a thicker gauge. With this wiring, the thicker gauge one's going to be used for the 3 power and ground terminals here. And this is where we're going to start. So first things first, we'll have to measure out our power and ground. With these, I just like to, with the power and ground wire, the thicker one, I do just like to split that into 3, to an even 3. It's going to be way too long, but it's fine. It's better to have more than not enough, and that's fine. So tools wise for this part, you just need snips and some wire cutters. Now, I'm not going to use these wire cutters to cut the wire. I'm actually going to use that little hole to put a little cut in the sheath. Then I just pull that off with my fingernail. So we'll just split this power cord into 3. And with this, just go in the, not the smallest one, but it's the one on the end there. And I just like to have it, so let's see if that'll fit. Not too far out, doesn't have to be that much. But go here, give it a little dent in the sheath, and that'll come off just like that. And so that's how I like to do it for all of the wires. So I do that to both sides. So then I just go ahead and repeat the process on the thicker gauge wire. So the next part is splitting the smaller gauge wire into many little pieces. So I'll just take a tape measure again. I like to cut them all up at around about 25 centimeters. Most of the time that's going to be okay. This doesn't have to be perfect, but you should be good when you have more than enough. So this part takes ages. Basically, what you're going to do is cut that reel up into many little pieces. So like I said, you don't have to be super accurate with the length of these, just as long as they're roughly the same, but I think you get the gist. So let's just fast forward. Now this is one of the worst things that can happen at this point, and it easily happens and it's super annoying, but the wiring can get knotted up, and so you've got the extra challenge of trying to undo this mess neatly so that you don't kink the wire too much. Alright, so now you should have something that looks like this. You've got the 3 power wires and a whole bunch of smaller ones. They're easy. Next thing to do with all the smaller ones is to again crimp the wire on both ends. Then remove the sheath. Now we'll just look at that nice and close so you can see exactly what I'm doing. So you can see that the tip of the copper wiring there is just sticking out, and that's all you really need. You don't need to strip too much sheathing off. Now this is probably the most time-effective way to deal with the wiring, and that's doing it all in batches. So cut all the wiring into the lengths, then crimp all the wiring ends, then strip all of the wiring ends and twist them at the same time. I just find that doing it this way saves so much more time rather than doing them one by one when you get to each wire, when you get to soldering on the PCB. So now that you've prepared all of the smaller wirings and the thicker ones, we'll get rid of these for now. And bring in the ColourMFA motherboard. I like to use something to hold this up, maybe like a couple of blobs of blue tack or a PCB holder. You can get them, they look like little alligator clips on some flexible arms. Otherwise, if you do have one of these little guys around, it's super handy. It's just a oxygen sensor socket, and you can see that it's kind of like conveniently holding that up just like that. And you can flip it around at different angles just so you can get access to what you need to get to. So grab your soldering iron, and you've got solder as well. So the first 3 that we do, you always want to go in from where the USB wires are, so just follow the directions of that. Now you want to be extra neat in doing these, so that there's no stray wires on the rear side of the PCB, because that will be touching, or almost touching, the instrument cluster where you're going to mount it. So you do want to take the utmost of care doing this so that none of the connections are bridged. Okay, so we can see that the middle one here needs a little bit of extra solder so that the whole pad is covered. So I'm just gonna fix that and then snip them off, because that middle one is also, I don't know if you can see it, it's quite high. Alright, so from this point on, the wiring will differ depending on what car you'll be installing the ColourMFA unit in. So what you're going to do, just depending on the car model, is follow the wiring diagram or the schematic as to which ones of these smaller wires, or these, will be soldered into many of the contacts around the edges. So that part I won't show, because the process that we've seen up till now is pretty much universal, and I'll split off the video here to then move into specific ones for each cluster that is currently available for a ColourMFA mod. So we'll just stop it here for now, and you'll see that continuing on, you will be viewing model specific installation of the wires. So that should give you a good head start and save you some time in handling the wiring, so the beginning parts of the ColourMFA installation. To view the model specific installations, just click down into the description below and I'll link out through to the model specific DIY guides down there. Cool, thanks so much for clicking in, and if you like this content, please remember to like and subscribe. Also check out my other Audi related content. Bye.